Hagmann and Hagmann report for today. It is Tuesday, September 30th, 2014. I'm Doug Hagmann, co-host along with my son, Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Folks, you're about to hear 3 hours of incredible programming, unbiased, uncensored news, information, analysis that you need to know in these times, which are becoming ever more perilous. Folks, you're listening to the only show where the news is presented to you in 3D. So if you've got them, get out your 3D glasses. Or maybe they should be 3D earmuffs. I don't know. We look at everything in 3D or multiple dimensions. We look well beyond the headlines, the bylines, the fog of disinformation, misinformation, to bring you the news behind the news. And for the new listeners, I want to thank everyone for checking in, letting us know that they're listening. For the relatively new listeners, are listening for the first or second time. We broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern. Our home base on the internet, folks, is HagmannandHagmann.com. That's right, HagmannandHagmann.com. And you can join us, too, as we're simulcast in several locations, including the Christians United Broadcasting Network. There you can tune us in, at thehagmannandthehagmannreport.com. Joe, you can take it over for a second there as I try to collect my voice.
Yeah, all day. Today was the first day since you started to get your throat issues that you sounded almost 100%. And up until the intro of the show, you were fine. As soon as the show started, it sounds like you're starting to get a little bit of hoarseness back in your throat.
Yeah, it's called hysterical paralysis, I think, because you look at the news. And isn't it something you just want to? It's incredible the headlines that we're seeing today, and it's interesting because I watched. Well, you watched a little bit of the Ebola news conference, or you watched the entire news conference, Joe.
Yeah.
I watched a little bit of it. I'm just probably throwing shoes against the TV, or as they call them now, monitors. But anyway, it was just to me. Look, folks. Go back to the September 25th episode with Steve Quayle and Dr. S. And we got a couple of emails saying, "Oh, you guys are just so hysterical. It's not going to come here, and if it does, it's not going to be bad." Well, I remember asking the question of Dr. S. And now, don't forget, this is a medical doctor who's got experience in a lot of areas. What his worst fear would be waking up in the morning, and he said waking up in the morning, turning on the television and seeing that there is a case of Ebola here in the United States. Well, didn't that just happen?
We've had the Ebola cases here in the U.S. already. There was a few doctors, if I remember correctly, flown into Atlanta, treated, and actually released after they were cured from Ebola. But this is a rather suspicious case, as there was a person who was traveling back and forth between West Africa and the U.S., and for some reason, symptomatic, he was able to fly back here to the United States. So it's not a case where Ebola has just shown up in the United States out of nowhere. This was a person who was traveling to and from West Africa, the place that has been plagued by Ebola. But now we have the CDC today did confirm that the Ebola victim was admitted to the Texas Health Presbyterian Hospital in Dallas. Reference to the patient's recent travel history suggests that the victim arrived from one of the African countries hit by the virus. The patient has been held in strict isolation, and the hospital is complying with all recommendations from the Center for Disease Control and the Texas Department of Health to ensure safety of other patients and medical staff, according to WFAA, that from a report on Infowars.com. Now, interesting, we see the this is Dallas-Fort Worth area, the first...
Yeah, let me stop you right there for a second. When I was talking to Steve Quayle, called me right as soon. I'm telling you, as soon as the CDC had made the announcement or told the media, I think it was 3:30 p.m. Or 3:32 p.m. is when they made the announcement to the media.
5:30 something. 4:30.
Well, I think that was. Right, that was the news conference, but there was a couple hour, an hour,
Oh, okay.
2 hour lag time. At any rate, Steve called me within minutes after the confirmation and said, "Don't you think it's a little bit funny that this first case appeared in Dallas, in Texas?" And I thought about that. You know, Rick Perry,
the border issues,
Obama, the border issues, all of this.
Yeah.
Now, honestly, in thinking about this from an investigative point of view, I don't know exactly how. For example, if they wanted to keep the borders open, for example, if they wanted to exacerbate the situation, why Texas? Aside from the punishment, the vengeance aspect, because wouldn't this have the opposite effect? In other words, cause I don't want to say the borders to shut down, but people to be shut down. You know?
What you're saying is a valid point, because with such a crisis, a declared crisis in West Africa, and this person, the individual who is now in the Dallas hospital, traveled to and from Liberia, we have this huge, this is a huge enough crisis to where even the president is making press conferences on Ebola in West Africa. You have the Center for Disease Control drafting Ebola response plans, the World Health Organization, UN, World Bank getting involved. Why isn't there travel restrictions from these areas where there are massive cases of Ebola? How can this go on? Not only that, further information has shown that the Dallas officials will not inform passengers who were flying which plane this gentleman was on, meaning if you were on a flight that came into Dallas, you will not be able to find out if you were on the flight this gentleman was on.
Yeah, I don't think he flew right from Liberia to Dallas, obviously. At least I don't think that's the case.
This is what they said here, that the press conference, the CDC Director Thomas Frieden relayed information that the individual who tested positive had traveled to Liberia. The person left Liberia on September 19th, arrived in the United States on the 20th of September with no virus symptoms. Frieden said it was 4 or 5 days later that the patient, who is believed to be a male, began developing symptoms and ultimately was admitted to the Presbyterian Hospital in Dallas on September 28th. So he traveled from Liberia to the United States. It does not say where in the United States he arrived, but 8 days after his arrival, he was admitted to the hospital where the Ebola was declared to be the disease he had. Now, as much hype that is going on about this virus, at the CDC press conference today, they were talking about what would have to be done for this to be spread. And there was a few comments that were interesting. One of the comments that was made was, we all breathe the same air, which was kind of an odd comment to make. And then they talked about how the virus can only travel through saliva or diarrhea, bodily fluids. And so a lot of kind of double talk out there, but I'd imagine the people at the hospital at Dallas-Fort Worth are rather on edge, wondering, is this are we talking about an airborne illness, or are we talking about a regular Ebola virus which would need bodily fluids or a way to transmit this, person to person? If it's an airborne illness, obviously there's going to be a lot of cases popping up. Steve and the doctor who came on have talked about the incubation period being 21 days,
right,
roughly. So will we see more cases here in the United States within the next few weeks? That's a question we're going to have to keep our eyes open to understand. But I don't think there's any reason for hysteria or panic at this moment. The biggest concern I see is the allowance of travel. From people from West Africa to here without any type of screening to make sure they do not have the virus before they're traveling.
Well, again, there's never any reason for hysteria or panic. There's all reasons for preparation, and if you're prepared, and certainly we don't need to panic, and we just need to be aware. We need to be knowledgeable about what's going on. That's all. I think what we're going to do, the Hagmann and Hagmann listeners, we'll call this the Obamometer strain. How's that? Obamometer strain? After the Andromeda strain movie back in 1971. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not exactly sure how many people remember that movie, the Andromeda strain, but we'll call it the Obamometer strain. And I really, when you look at everything Obama, his people have done, I have a real problem with how they're handling this Ebola situation. However, the other thing too, I would urge everyone again to go back to the September 25th episode. Download that, folks. Listen to that with respect to what Dr. S says and what Steve Quayle said about this particular virus. And don't forget, too, look, I don't believe in coincidences, and it was just a matter of time before it got here. But, my questions are, why Dallas? Why Dallas? Why now? Where was this guy? And I'm sure if I lived in the Dallas area, and I know we've got a lot of listeners in the Dallas area, our prayers are with you. But if I was around there, I would be concerned because this virus can be. It's my understanding that for example, if you sneeze on a shopping cart handle, we'll say, or sneeze in your hand and put your hand on the shopping cart handle, that virus can live there for for at least a couple of days. Now, I might get email corrections saying, no, it could live there for a couple of hours or a couple of weeks or indefinitely or whatever, but it doesn't matter, really. What matters is the fact that this guy's been out traveling around. The screening process.
8 days in America.
Right. 8 days without being hospitalized.
Right. And he's in, from this report from Newsmax stating or speaking to the condition of the patient, it says the first Ebola case diagnosed in the U.S. is critically ill, and it goes on to say that this first case of Ebola from this man who traveled to the U.S. on the 20th of September, the man is being kept in isolation, and he was hospitalized. He said this says he sought medical care on the 26th of September. He was hospitalized 2 days later and now is critically ill. That, again, from the Center for Disease Control, Thomas Frieden. Goes on to say that the Center for Disease Control has a team of epidemiologists on the way to Texas now. The team will follow anyone who has had contact with a man for 21 days. If they develop any symptoms, they'll be immediately isolated. Anyone who has had contact with them also. The diagnosis was first confirmed by the Texas lab based on samples from the man's blood and confirmed by the CDC. Now, in the press conference, I believe, I also heard them speak of Nigeria and how they believe that Nigeria has contained the Ebola virus or the spreading. They believe they've been able to contain the further of the spreading of the virus. And they said this is a disease that is containable. They did not seem to... I mean, there's a lot of double talk here. There's a lot of confusion here. But the statistics go on to state that in 3 West African countries, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea, the outbreak has infected 6,500 plus people. It's killed 3,000 plus.
Patient zero was patient zero was in Liberia back in March. Then 2 healthcare workers that treated him right after that. Then 3 or 4 relatives of them after that. Now, one of them went back to their home 90 miles away. That became infected, and it just spiraled. And you're right, 7 months later, 6,500 people were infected. Folks, you don't need to take a bath in their blood or bodily fluids to catch this. It's sweat, the transference of sweat, or spittle on the seat or a handle or a door handle or any type of hard surface. And then you touch your mouth or your nose or rub your eyes or any mucous membrane. It can be transmitted. Look, I'm not having a good good warm fuzzy feeling about this, especially when you overlay this with the type of law enforcement we saw with Hurricane Katrina, and then moving forward with all of the other incidents. I do believe that this could be something very. I mean, so think about those 8 days, Joe. Think about that. Where was this guy? And even if he went right from the airport to the hospital, for example.
Well, yeah, which we know he didn't.
Right. I mean, you've got an airport, a plane load of people. You've got everyone, exposed, really potentially exposed in the airport itself. And then, by the way, this could have severe economic impact. A severe economic impact to the Dallas area, and who knows, beyond that, who knows? So, look, I don't have a warm and fuzzy feeling for this. We knew that things were going to be taking place as we came into the fourth quarter of 2014. Could this be one of them? And you're right, Joe. It's not, there's no reason for panic and hysteria. On the other hand, there's every reason for caution and preparation.
Yes, I agree. And we're going to talk more about this Ebola virus and with Stan as he comes on in the second hour. But switching gears now, I want to get into this story and a number of stories concerning the Secret Service, the security of the White House, and the security lapses that have happened. The GOP representative, politically correct Secret Service has allowed 1,000 security lapses. An internal Secret Service report revealed more than 1,000 security breaches and vulnerabilities, according to a House investigator who said that a politically correct culture is endangering the life of President Barack Obama. There are new details that will come out. You really have to question if the security is the number one objective. This from Representative Jason Chavez, a Republican out of Utah who sits on the House Oversight Committee.
I'm going to teach you how to pronounce his name yet. It's Chavez.
Chavez. Okay. Well, the report goes on to say, or he goes on to say, that he backs up his reference to the Secret Service statement with the most recent security breach. This from a man jumping the White House, and new information has come out this story that we heard that an armed intruder jumped the White House fence and breached the White House, made it into the White House. Well, now it has come out that the armed intruder made it all the way through the White House into the East Room. An armed man who jumped the White House fence this month made it far deeper into the mansion than previously disclosed, overpowering a Secret Service agent inside the North Portico entrance, running through the ceremonial East Room before he was tackled by an off-duty Secret Service agent, according to a member of Congress familiar with the details of the incident. The man, Omar Gonzalez, who had a knife, was stopped as he tried to enter the green room, a parlor used for receptions and teas, said the congressman from Utah. It goes on to say that Mr. Gonzalez, the Secret Service officials indicated that Mr. Gonzalez, a 42-year-old, had only made it steps inside the North Portico after running through the door. The new development, first reported by the Washington Post, raised immediate questions about whether the Secret Service had been forthright about its initial accounts of this episode, or whether there was a cover-up being involved. It will set a stage for an explosive congressional hearing on Tuesday when lawmakers say they intend to grill Julia Pearson, the director of the Secret Service, about whether an undisciplined culture inside the long-heralded agency has eroded its ability to protect the president and his family.
Exactly. Well, I was talking with our intelligence insider earlier today, and I think he echoed something that I felt as well. There's something more to this than we're being told, obviously. There's something a lot more to this than we're being told. The Secret Service has layers of protection. For example, you jump the fence and you start running in. Well, there are layers of protection within the property, and I won't get too specific. And I'll tell you this:
we were just there not too long ago, earlier this year, and how many police officers? We took some pictures right outside the fence. How many police officers were there, right outside? I mean, outside the fence, just standing there, armed. Some on either side of the fence, there was a huge presence. Now, you remember the Capitol Police shot a woman who rammed a barrier at the Capitol building. And she was, I mean, we've seen similar breaches, or not similar breaches, we've seen breaches of a much lesser importance, and the outcomes have been much different. Now, with this, for whatever reason, as you stated to me before the show, that the reasons that the Secret Service did not act directly is that they were waiting for further security breaches to following that man. And sorry for that pause, awkward pause. We have a new studio puppy, and it just started making problems in the office. My dad had to take him out, so he'll be right back. But yeah, we have a huge issue with the Secret Service here. Over 1,000 breaches, 1,000 security breaches and vulnerabilities. How protected is the president? And is this something that, I mean, there was a report that came out about the CDC in Atlanta where Obama was visiting, and a man was on the elevator with him who was armed and had a gun. And it was not known by the Secret Service agents who were in the elevator until after the man started acting weird and taking pictures.
I think there are messages being sent here. Messages being sent. That's my view. It's not incompetence. All right, we're back on the air. Something happened there. We apologize for that. Wow, that was kind of a weird thing. Everything kind of went dark for a minute.
All right, yeah, you left the room. I told the people that we have a new studio puppy. It's an Australian Shepherd. It's a beautiful little puppy named Lady, and we have some pictures we can post on the website. But she's already, I don't know, 10 weeks old maybe, but she's housebroken, and you know, usually we can get in the studio here. We have somebody who comes and gets her, and we'll take her out, and they're not here right now, so she actually had an accident over there, and then she started playing with it. So we're both rushing around trying to get the stuff out of her mouth and get her outside.
This professional radio at its finest. Well, you know, hey, look, it happens, and that's right. Actually, for the people who want to know, we actually rescued this Australian Shepherd, and of course, Holly was my first Australian Shepherd mix. But we rescued her from a shelter, or from a situation where it was a bad situation, and when we rescued this Australian Shepherd, just 3 weeks before King passed away, and didn't say anything to anyone, only because, or very few people, only because, you know, it's, well, what do you say, you know, hoping too that her presence would uplift King a little bit, and I'm not sure exactly how that went, whether King, you know, whether he had prolonged him or not, or gave him any type of what would you call it, additional motivation. I'm not sure it would have mattered regardless, but having said that, she's just a joy to be around, and you forget, however, folks, kids and puppies, children and puppies, you forget about how much work there is involved with them, right? But nonetheless, she's just an adorable, very intelligent. In fact, she has outsmarted me.
Yeah, and she's been in the studio. She was in here last week, and there was no issues. We didn't have any issues like that last week. That was the first time we had an issue. But it's going to happen. She's a puppy, and as I said, Dad, you're going to have to post some pictures of her up on the website, because she is a very cute puppy, and people are going to want to see her.
I got to tell you, she's grown probably twice in size. Of course, she was, when we did pick her out of the situation that she was in, and it was kind of unexpected. We had an hour roughly to decide, and in fact, or less, not decide, but to take action, and we did. And when we got her, we took her right to to the vet, and she checked her out and said, "Oh man, really in good shape for what she had gone through." And then I think she's probably grown, doubled in size since. I don't know, for the last, I think it's better for about 3 weeks a month. But, yeah, enough of this. With all the news going on, I apologize. At least people understand that, we're human and we do have lives, right?
Yeah,
okay.
That was pretty funny, though. Switching gears again here, exclusive. America's allies almost bombed in Syrian airstrikes. The White House says it wants to work with Syria's moderate rebels, but warplanes from the U.S.-led coalition came awfully close to striking one of their own headquarters. Last week, an airstrike from the American-led coalition nearly hit a command and control facility affiliated with the Free Syrian Army. The moderate rebels, the Obama administration says, are America's boots on the ground, according to two opposition leaders. They are asking the Obama administration to please coordinate with them in the future before American bombs its only allies in Syria. Since U.S. airstrikes against ISIS in Syria began on September 22nd, there have been no coordination between the U.S. military and the alleged partners on the ground, according to the Free Syrian Army leaders, civilian opposition leaders, and intelligence sources who have been briefed on the U.S. and allied military operations. It's this lack of communication that has led to an airstrike that hit only 200 meters from an FSA facility in the suburbs of Idlib. One source briefed on the incident said multiple FSA fighters were killed in the attack. Now, we have a few audio clips. One, ISIS blame game. The U.S. president has blamed the intelligence agencies for the uprising in ISIS here, and I want to play this clip because I have another one right after it. Obama was warned repeatedly about the consequences of withdrawal from Iraq. Here is ISIS blame game.
Asked whether the rapid rise of ISIS took him by surprise, President Obama punted to his Director of National Intelligence on 60 Minutes. The moment was hard to miss.
Well, I think our head of the intelligence community, Jim Clapper, has acknowledged that I think they underestimated what had been taking place in Syria.
White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest insisted the president was not fixing any blame.
That is not what the president's intent was. Ultimately, the president's commander-in-chief, and he's the one who takes responsibility for ensuring that we have the kinds of policies in place that are required to protect our interests around the globe.
Does the president have confidence in the intelligence he's receiving now from the intelligence community with respect to ISIS?
Absolutely.
The intelligence community has been sounding the ISIS alarm for nearly a year. Last November, a key State Department official testified ISIS has benefited from a permissive operating environment due to inherent weaknesses of Iraqi security forces, a warning echoed by the head of Defense Intelligence in February.
The level of killing that they're doing inside of that country is terrible.
GOP critics say it's the president who underestimated the threat.
Intelligence people are pushing back hard.
Right.
We predicted this and watched it. It was like watching a train wreck and warning every step of the way.
White House officials say the president's comments are hardly new, noting what he said in August.
Their advance, their movement over the last several months has been more rapid than the intelligence estimates.
In January, President Obama refers to the Islamic State as a JV team.
The president's handling of ISIS could become a key issue in the race for the Senate. Consider North Carolina, where the GOP challenger's new ad ties incumbent Kay Hagan to Mr. Obama.
The price for their failure is danger.
Now, the White House was asked for a response to that ad, but declined. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest said when it comes to ISIS, he'll continue to praise Republicans who support the president's strategy, adding our national security, in his words, trumps local politics.
All right, there was the report on Obama and the ISIS blame game, blaming U.S. intelligence agencies for the uprising in ISIS, without his knowing. Yet, at the same time, we see here that the president, this from Breitbart and Bloomberg.com, Obama has only received, 40% or 60%? Obama has missed over half of his second-term daily intelligence briefings. This is a huge deal in my mind. You know, you're the leader of this country. A new Government Accountability Institute report reveals that the president has attended only 42.1% of his daily intelligence briefings, known officially as the Presidential Daily Brief, or in the 2,079 days of his presidency through September 29, 2014. The GIA report also includes the breakdown of Obama's PDB, or the Presidential Daily Brief, attendance records between 42.4% in his first term, from his first term, to 41.3% in his second term. The alarming findings come on the heels of Obama's 60 Minutes comment Sunday, where the president laid the blame for the Islamic State's rapid rise squarely at the feet of the director of the National Security Agency, Mr. James Clapper. Now, I have an audio clip here of Obama being warned repeatedly about the consequences of withdrawing from Iraq. It's a compilation of James Clapper and a few other people I'd like to play. It's very telling.
Yeah, and I've got some comments after this, so go ahead and play this. Folks, listen carefully to this.
Our head of the intelligence community, Jim Clapper, has acknowledged that I think they underestimated what had been taking place in Syria.
Our country has given a great deal in blood and treasure to stabilize the situation in Iraq. I am certain that abandoning or drastically curtailing our efforts will bring failure. An Iraq that falls into chaos or civil war will mean massive human suffering.
Dave Petraeus and I refused to talk about timelines. We talked about what needed to be done. To set an arbitrary timeline is just telling the enemy how long he has to wait.
I think people who have watched this closely, and I've been one of them, have seen this coming.
If I were to say to you, let's set a timeline of getting all of our combat troops out within 2 years, what do you think would be the consequences of setting that kind of a timeline?
I think the consequences could be very dangerous in that regard.
I think we're taking steps towards losing this peace after having won the war.
The reason why this is so tragic, it's not just about security. Our military forces stay to maintain influence. When we walk away at the end of conflict, it has a tendency not to work.
Are you confident in that moment that pulling out was the right thing to do?
No, I wasn't. I really thought that it was important for us to maintain a presence in Iraq.
We took the training wheels off too early with the Maliki government.
Either the president doesn't read the intelligence he's getting or he's BSing.
To begin withdrawing before our commanders tell us we're ready would be dangerous for Iraq, for the region, and for the United States. It would mean increasing the probability that American troops would have to return at some later date to confront an enemy that is even more dangerous.
All right. Well, here's my contention right now. Everyone is looking at the fact that we have left Iraq, correct? I mean, that's the story there, or that's the ostensible story, us leaving Iraq. I think the question should be framed, why did we go into Iraq? What was our reason behind George W. Bush going into Iraq? And, of course, if you look at the history behind George H.W. Bush, Desert Shield, and then Desert Storm, and then the various things that we did with Iraq during the 90s and during the 80s and 90s, both the various operations we conducted, and then, of course, the big operation announcing the invasion into Iraq, and the terminology used. And I think people forget about the terminology being used by Bush when he announced going into both Afghanistan and Iraq. So my contention here, folks, is are these the correct questions? I mean, it's correct essentially that we created a situation. You talk about the ultimate destabilization of a country. We talk about Libya, for example, and Egypt, and all the countries with Arab Spring. But really, the quintessential destabilization was certainly Iraq, where now it's really it's really split up into three sections. And of course, the first section, or the north section, belonged to the Kurds, and then you've got the other sections split along sectarian lines. So why did we go into Iraq? That's my that's where I'm coming from. And is this just Barack Hussein Obama? I think Obama and those involved right now are following through on orders, plans that were laid decades ago.
Absolutely.
So, and this also deals with Syria as well, and ISIS. We are striking, and I would guarantee you we're striking.
We're not striking ISIS. And why is it not in the news? Why are these target strikes not in the news? Why are they not being televised? Why are they not being reported on? It is because we are not striking the targets we have set out to strike. Instead, we are going after Assad. Their main goal is still to topple the Assad regime, disposing of Assad first and foremost. And if ISIS is an actual threat that they believe needs to be taken out, that might be a secondary goal. While it is their first stated goal, it is a goal that is not being carried out at the moment. We're not seeing headlines. ISIS, receives massive blow from U.S. airstrikes. We're seeing allies blown up. We're seeing, opponents of ISIS who are meetings, secret meetings held, being blown up, randomly, or not randomly. What was that headline a couple of weeks ago? 50 leaders of an opposition group, main opposition group fighting ISIS, were blown up by some unknown force. We're not seeing the Islamic State or ISIS, or as the president calls it, ISIL, being airstriked.
Right.
We're not seeing them being bombed. We're not seeing them being taken out. We're not seeing them being deterred, stopped, or dismantled by any stretch of the imagination. It is like the problem is out of sight, out of mind, and the media is not asking questions, only reporting that airstrikes are continuing in Syria against ISIL, blah, blah, blah. Where's the proof? And speaking to extreme terrorism, I want to get into this case in the the Oklahoma beheading case. This Alexander Nolan, we have the court documents here, and we have found out exactly what has happened on that day, the 25th day of September, in Cleveland County, Oklahoma. Their court documents read as follows: that the employee, Mr. Alexander Nolan, was left the HR office at Vaughn Foods, where he was suspended due to a complaint at the business, drove to his residence for the sole reason to retrieve a large bladed knife from inside the residence. The defendant returned to Vaughn Foods with the large knife in his shoe in order to assault an employee of the business with the knife. The defendant entered the business and walked to the office where the first victim was standing. The defendant grabbed the first victim from behind and immediately began cutting her across the throat with a large knife, with a back-and-forth sawing motion. The defendant severed the victim's head from her body, then came in contact with the second victim. The defendant grabbed the second victim and cut her across her throat and the left side of her face with the knife. The defendant was then shot by an off-duty Oklahoma County Reserve officer who also works at Vaughn Foods. The second victim was the subject that submitted a complaint that initiated the investigation against the defendant. The defendant was interviewed by detectives, read his Miranda rights, agreed to talk to detectives, and openly admitted to beheading the first victim with a knife and cutting and attempting to behead the second victim with the knife he went to his apartment to retrieve. He has been charged with 1 count of first-degree murder, 1 count of aggravated assault and battery with a deadly weapon, and a second count of assault with a deadly weapon.
There was a CNN. Well, let me make sure I've got this correct. I don't want to identify someone that CNN anchor John Berman, host of This Hour. No, he somehow, he was, and I don't find this humorous at all. John Berman, the host of this hour, used the phrase, any way you slice it, 3 times in 10 seconds while discussing the beheading, okay? Now, he apologized via Twitter, saying, I wish I hadn't said what I said. I feel horribly. But folks, I mean, no, that's kind of an anecdotal reference there. But if you look at the criminal complaint, there is absolutely no doubt whatsoever, that this person, this individual, words don't even come easy in describing this individual. To me, it's a clear-cut case of Islamic justice. The people from the Council on American Islamic Relations and other places may apologize or may say this is not Islam, but is that really true? Are those words true, or are they just hollow sentiments? No, I think they're hollow. I really do. I believe that
Melissa Harris Perry in MSNBC have continued the narrative of this being, as I stated, workplace violence. Joe Scarborough, also an MSNBC host, reiterated the same thing. Megyn Kelly did a good interview with, I forget the representative, it was a female representative. I did not upload the soundbite, but she, blasts these notions and these hosts of these MSNBC saying, where do you draw the line between workplace violence and terrorism? We see that the shooter of Fort Hood, the first Fort Hood shooting with Nidal Hassan, I think, is that correct, his name? Nidal
Yes,
Hassan?
that's correct. That's correct.
They deem that workplace violence also. And Megyn Kelly made the point that the assailant, defendant Nolan, had a Facebook page filled with beheading, Islamic literature, Osama bin Laden literature, and different violent, terroristic, what we would consider terroristic literature.
Well, if you look at his Facebook page, even a federal law enforcement official described his Facebook page and postings as provocative, meaning the Islamic bias. A photo of Osama bin Laden, for example. The wide range of photos available on the page also included a depiction of a beheading, several messages pertaining to Islam and converts. Nolan's relatives, now it's interesting that his relatives told the Associated Press that he himself grew up in a non-denominational Christian church. Oh, really? Okay. And I say, oh, really, only because one has to wonder exactly why what he did when he was a child. I mean, I understand perhaps a little bit of the background here, but to bring this in, to specifically mention the fact that Nolan grew up in a non-denominational Christian church as a child, to me, against the backdrop of his actions, is nearing hate speech against Christianity. That's my view on this. A prominent Muslim leader in the Moore area of Oklahoma told reporters that several attendees of his mosque knew the guy, saying that he was a little bit iffy anyway. I mean, you could tell, but no one did anything before the act. It's interesting too. Governor Rick Perry, the FBI is treating the case as workplace violence. Now, Nolan's religious adherence and the fact that the victims were beheaded have led a couple of people, including Governor Rick Perry, to question why law enforcement officials and the media have not called the attack a terrorist attack. Well, a terrorist act. Well, it doesn't have to be a terrorist attack. It could be motivated or conducted in an Islamic fashion or a Muslim fashion. The terrorist attack denotes some sort of mass casualty event. To me, that would be larger in scope and scale. However, this to me is Orthodox Islam. That's my view, anyway.
Well, think of it like this: there's an anti-government, "Don't tread on me" sticker, having gun-owning American who's disgruntled at some job he has at the post office or at a government agency, we'll say the IRS, for instance, and he goes in and he shoots his boss because he was, fired, and his Facebook page is full of anti-government literature. What would he be called?
And that's a good point. That's a very good point. And
so why should it be? Why are we playing this politically correct game when it pertains to the Muslim extremists carrying out violent acts against American citizens? When it's the opposite when you see quote unquote domestic extremists or right-wing extremists carrying out acts of violence against the same people. I mean, why is there two different standards? Why is there two different sets of terminologies for who these people are said to be?
No, you're exactly right. No, and I want to thank you for making that into a very coherent statement that I was unable to do before. But look, I do believe that what we're seeing here, and as you said, this is not workplace violence, although I'm sure it will be ultimately classified as that. If they can make Nidal Hassan's case workplace violence, certainly they can make this workplace violence. But the fact that this man didn't just stab the individuals, he beheaded them, to me speaks toward the Islamic leanings, belief of this individual. Whether or not you believe it, it doesn't matter. Whether or not the prosecutors believe it, well, it does matter, but ultimately it doesn't. It matters what the actor, what the suspect himself believed. And when you've got a man shouting Allah Akbar while he's actually severing someone's head, to me tells that this is a crime motivated by, or at least facilitated by, the ideology of Islam. And that's a kind of a hard pill for some people to swallow. I understand that. But this kind of segues into one thing that I'd like to point people's attention to. I finally, and I had mentioned this before, I'm telling all, I finally decided to just lay it all out. And I published an article today at HagmanandHagmann.com and CanadaFreePress.com. They were kind enough to run it as well. And it's providing evidence of Muslim training camps here in this country. We're not talking about just training camps that train small numbers of Muslims. We're talking about a lot of rural areas as well as urban areas where young men are indoctrinated, where you've got members of the prison population being indoctrinated into this ideology of Islamic terrorism. Now, this, in fact, is Islamic terrorism. The first article out, which appeared today, is an introduction to how I got involved in this investigation and lays the groundwork for what follows. Tomorrow, I'll begin showing a lot of the photographs of the training compounds inside and outside, some activities that took place there. And I'll also be including, as the investigative series progresses, statements from county officials, statements from neighbors to these areas that will undoubtedly verify that what we have had in this country since 9/11 and even long before 9/11/2001 were locations where Muslims can target practice. They can get in shape. They can, in fact, in one location there was and I talked about this before, there was a school bus riddled with bullet holes, and of course they would use the school bus as a practice vehicle to board, to take over with prejudice. And one has to wonder why, after such very provocative and very compelling evidence that the government, that the federal officials, the officials on the federal level have failed to act, not made arrests, for example. And a lot of these compounds, I shouldn't say, well, this one particular group, that is Jamaat al-Fukra, is tied to a lot of white-collar crime, and their operational tactics are very frightening, to the extent where, or very disconcerting, I should say, to the extent where they will buy property that near or having easements for energy, power lines, water servicing. In fact, the one compound in New York State is by a reservoir that supplies all of New York City, water for New York City.
Haven't people been caught in scuba gear under the water, casing the different power resources, energy resources that are located down there? So there are, the report you can find. I'll post it in the chat room here at HagmanandHagmann.com. It's also on Canada Free Press. It's evidence of the Islamic terror threat within our borders. It's a interesting write-up, and I would urge everybody to read it, as it is definitely worth the read. But yeah, in here you do include just a few, I think at least one picture of when you were Islamberg. Yeah, welcome to Islamberg.
Yeah.
Fun times.
For every one picture that I'll post, I've probably got maybe 500 photographs that I can't post. But if I can say this, and one of the reasons why I'm speaking out now about this, folks, it's because there are two camps, two ideologies at play here. And I think it's of critical importance to understand what's going on. I'm here to tell you that the threat by the Orthodox Muslims to the United States and within the United States is, in fact, legitimate. Okay? Now, having said that, people will downplay or deny that threat in all of its forms. But even if you have a cursory understanding of history, you'll understand that the threat of Islamic terrorism is real. Now, those who deny or downplay this threat, really, this is a very dangerous and very perilous position, which is either birthed from ignorance or is an act of deliberate deception. But let me stress this. The Muslim threat is legitimate, but it's merely one component of a much bigger, vastly larger, much more complex threat, rooted in an extensive criminal conspiracy that has existed for decades in some instances and even longer in other instances. Now, that said, the opposite side of the spectrum, and I write about this in here, there are those who deny that any conspiracy exists whatsoever and cite only the acts of Islamic terrorism and Muslim terrorists. Now think about this. You've got scholars out there and attorneys and bloggers, well-known, very well-known, who will write about every act of Islamic terrorism and stop. Is that wrong? No, that's not incorrect. They're not incorrect, but they're not doing us a service or anyone a service by stopping there without looking at the larger picture. They're not incorrect in their identification of the Muslim suspects or the Muslim terrorists and the events of Islamic terrorism. their investigation and reporting is flawed by not looking well beyond the obvious, and that's the obvious, of course. And I put in the article where I paraphrase Steve Quayle. It's like looking at, the only seeing the fruit of the evil, yet refusing to identify the root of the evil. There are two opposing views, like I said, but it's so important to understand that while Islamic terrorism is in fact a legitimate, genuine threat, absolutely 100%, it's also being managed. And I do explain in this particular introductory article how I came to that realization. And folks, I think you'll find it pretty interesting, and the subsequent articles and reports interesting as well, because what I will be reporting in the next part of the series, and just so everyone knows, there are more than one other person, so there are several other people who have all of the reports, all of the documents, copies of the photographs, copies of the videos, copies of the affidavits. So having said all of that, even if I was taken out of the picture, the story could go on and would go on. But having said that, the bottom line here is we're looking at a threat that has been unmolested, been allowed to go unmolested in this country. And there is a Muslim army in this country that's being prepared to rise up along with the blacks. Now, that's not a racist statement. I don't consider that racist at all. That's just a very descriptive statement. For example, Jamaat al-Fukra. These are not necessarily Arab Americans, or these are not people from Saudi Arabia, maybe Pakistan, but the majority of them are black Americans. If you choose to call them African Americans or whatever, it doesn't matter. But that's the pool from which these individuals are recruited. And we saw Nolan in Oklahoma. He's a black American, right? African American. So this is the danger that we find ourselves in right now. But what's really problematic with this, and I'll close with this, is the fact, folks, that when we turned in our reports to the FBI, and I said this before, the ink was not even dry on the report on Jamaat al-Fukra, on that terrorist organization. The report where the ink wasn't even dry on that. When Sheikh Jilani knew everything that was inside that report. Now, how do you explain that without complicity and collusion within the United States government? There's just no way to explain it otherwise. There's no innocuous or non-nefarious explanation for that. And for that, of course, there was a religious statement that was posted about me, naming me, and I've got a link to that so you can view that statement by Sheikh Jilani. But what you read in, and be very careful, folks, what you read in books. There's one book in particular that is all about Jamaat al-Fukra that to me does not even come close to what was really going on, although the individual who wrote it and people around him claimed to have been at the various, and were at the various compounds. But by that time, the covert aspect, the element of surprise, the element of surreptitiousness was already compromised. So when you read and look at documentaries that are produced by other people and other agencies, other entities, it's not that they're totally wrong. It's just that you've got to understand that by that time, the jig was up. And so not everything that you're witnessing is, or a lot of what you're witnessing, I should say, in documentaries and in reading in the books, it's secondary or much less by degrees to the reality of the situation. So are we in trouble? Yes, we are in deep trouble. And I will say that the government is in definite collusion with these camps and with these individuals. And there is a vast network, a white-collar crime element to this, folks, that is costing this country billions of dollars. There's infiltration into private security companies who have contracts with the federal government the infiltration is so bad, ladies and gentlemen. It is so deep. It is so deeply rooted. And a lot of this took place under the watch of George W. Bush and his people.
Yes, it did. With that, we're going to go to the Hagmann and Hagmann report on this last day of September, the 30th, 2014. We are joined, as we are every Tuesday in the second hour, by Stan Deyo, as my dad calls him, the real Indiana Jones. His website, standeyo.com. It's great to have you back on, Stan. We got a lot to talk about. I'm sure you saw the Ebola news conference today. What did you think about the conference and what we're seeing going on down in Dallas?
Hi, Stan.
Good evening. I had your show on. I was listening to it, and I was getting a reflection of it. I was thinking, what in the world is going on? Anyway, yeah, I've got that cleared up now. And good evening.
Which part confused you? The awkward silence or the holy cow, we got to do something?
It wasn't the awkward silence. I didn't even hear that. I was hearing Joe make his, usual intro thing, and then all of a sudden it started again over the top of what he was doing, and I was listening to two Joes at once, and what in the world is going on here? And then I realized I had it on a page on my browser that I wasn't even looking at, and it was still running the live program through that rather than through Skype. And anyway, problem solved.
Gotcha.
Technical glitch, but anyway, sorry about that, guys.
So yeah, well, it's great to know, Stan. It's so great to know that you're human too. All right.
What? Hey, how are you feeling?
Yeah, fantastic, actually. Just great. If I felt any better, I'd be two people. I'd be twins. No, on the mend, sir. On the mend. So thanks for that.
Excellent. Well, a lot of people were praying for that, and. Now then, with this Ebola thing sneaking into the country, you got to be extra careful of whatever shows up.
Yeah, it's really. I mean, I was thinking to myself today when I was looking at the news conference from the CDC. I mean, we don't know. You go into the store, you touch a shopping cart handle, you rub your eyes. Who knows? And you can pick up really some nasties, as I found out. So. That said, I mean, what's your take on what's going on here? Well, I mean, this is we're in trouble. That's my first thought.
My first thought is the same thing, and I'm sure you've seen on the internet the discussions that in the last week that Obama has signed another EO that gives the CDC permission to arrest or detain people that may not show symptoms of a viral infection, but just in case they were exposed, they can detain them for 3 weeks or whatever. This gives some rather sweeping powers to the CDC that could be misused. Not that I'm saying they would, but I'm just saying when Obama's involved in anything like that, I have to take a second look at it.
Well, yeah, I totally agree with you on this, and it's the criteria to use or that they would use for that particular incarceration or detention, whatever you want to call that, or containment. It is so broad that I mean, anyone out and about is at risk of being contained or being detained, I should say. So yeah, I totally agree with you. But if we think about this, though, Stan, I mean, this guy he was walking around for at least a week, infected. So he certainly didn't sit in his home or apartment or wherever. There's got to be some risk. Wouldn't it? I guess.
Well,
go ahead.
Let me say this: if that guy went into, say, a Walmart in those 5 days he was walking around, and had some, saliva or, it was on his skin, and he handled fruit in a Walmart or, something that would contain or hold the virus and let it live 24 to 48 hours on whatever surface he touched. If he did that, you'd have no way of knowing who came by, touched it, and picked it up. Now, I'm not saying that did happen, but the risk is not zero. In spite of what CDC says, they say, well, we've looked into who he had contact with. Okay, let's hope that means that neither he or anybody that he might have infected in that household touched anybody or touched something that, would pass this Ebola on to the public. I grant you, it probably would not pass on if they didn't have the symptoms of, extreme or elevated fever. But this is assuming that there's no mutation of the virus, which does occur when it takes up different hosts, and it's not airborne. I said to Holly, I said, as soon as we get Ebola in this country, one case, I said, we go into the prep mode around our, protection mode around our house. We're going to be careful of foodstuffs that we get, especially that could have been handled by someone by hand and, left fluid contaminated, like, washed lettuce and stuff like that in bags. We're going to be real careful of that, because it's hard to clean that completely if someone is infected it. And the thing with CDC, okay, they say we're in complete control of this particular incident. How many incidents all at once does it take before the CDC is overwhelmed? I mean, terrorists watch the news, and they get across our southern border like it was an open highway. So, all they've got to do is get some Ebola-type contaminants, bring them into the country, hit our food chain or some, major distribution channel that a lot of people use across the country, and bingo, they've hit more places than the CDC has, the ability to handle. Puts it back on our personal back, households. And as soon as I saw this, the press conference, what came to mind was when Holly and I were in Vegas 2 or 3 weeks ago for that John Galt, Atlas Shrugged movie premiere. It was the first time I'd ever stayed in a hotel there in years, like 15, 20 years. And I walked through the ground floor of this hotel, and, where the slot machines are, and a lot of the Asians that were in there gambling were wearing the white face masks even then, before anybody had heard about Ebola being much of a threat in Africa. Now, that's for airborne diseases, but or sneezes perhaps that are wet. So I'm saying that it might be time for those of us here at home to put pride aside, grab one of those face mask things, wear those, and wear gloves that are, not like porous, like rubber gloves or something like that when you're in the shops, buying food or testing food or whatever. And be careful of what fast food you eat, because you don't know who's handling that in there either and how sanitary it is. You're going to have to go into the defensive mode. Holly did a huge amount of research in that several years ago when she did the last edition of Dare to Prepare. I think it was a year ago when the last edition was put out. Yep. Looking at ways to protect yourself in extreme viral infection crises, and it wasn't for Ebola so much as it was for a lot of other types of diseases that you could get. And so in her book, I think it starts somewhere around chapter 34, it's called The Wonder of Clorox. And so if the Ebola thing does not happen in the United States, if they're able to contain it and the terrorists don't get it loose in this country, fine. But if they do, now is the time before it becomes widespread, before panic sets in. Now is the time to get your Clorox bleach. You can go to their website. I get no commissions from Clorox, but you can go to their website because they're using Clorox over in North Africa, Northwest Africa, to sanitize the workers there. So I was telling you right there that Clorox is a good thing to use. Now, Holly's book does say, okay, like Clorox does on their site, that you need a dosage of 2,400 parts per million chlorine in whatever chlorine you use, Clorox. You don't want to get the Clorox that has detergent in it, but you just want to get the sterilizing type chlorine. Now, as I say, you can go to Clorox.com, and on there they have got a number of things that will help. One of them is that you need to get chlorine strips, and I don't know that Clorox sells these, but you can look up indigo.com, indigo.com /test strips, and look up for chlorine test strips, and they've got chlorine test strips for weaker solutions and for strong ones, like for sanitizing, for viruses. And they've got a thing there that will test a little strip you dip into your Clorox, and it'll say, whether it's somewhere between 0 and 10,000 parts per million. And if you're having to measure 2,400 parts, per million, it'll tell you, it'll go 1/4 up the color scale in this, and you'll know that the chlorine you've got is strong enough to make a mixture to spray on surfaces in your house to, protect yourself from picking up, various viruses that are passed by hand to doorknobs and toilet seats and toilet handles and, the remote control for TV. I mean, places you probably don't think about, but you can spray these things and sanitize them, especially even if you've been to the grocery store and you've got groceries you brought in, you had gloves on there. There are going to be some of those packages that have been handled that might have been potentially exposed to a virus. And you can spray the outside with a little thing like a Windex bottle. You put this Clorox mixture of 2,400 parts per million, and you spray it on the outside of that. Now, understand this will bleach your clothes, so you got to be careful to not get it on you. But all these instructions are there in that chapter in Holly's book, and in much greater detail than they are on the Clorox side. But chapter 34 of Dare to Prepare, The Wonder of Clorox, and it gives you guidelines on sanitizing vegetables, eggs. There's different mixtures for each of that, and she gives it to you. And some of the mixture formulas she gives you are like, teaspoons per gallon and drops per gallon, that kind of stuff. But there are places in there where you have to know the parts per million. And as I say, on that site, indigo.com, under their test strip section, there are about 7 different ranges of test strips for chlorine that you just stick it in the mixture and it'll tell you what you're looking for, whether it be under 10 parts per million, which is using for sterilizing water and stuff like that, or whether it's going to be get rid of that Ebola virus, 0 to 10,000 parts per million, like 2,400 parts per million. That's there, and for about, I don't know how many test strips are in it, but it's $20 for a package of looks like a plastic bottle container type thing of. It's 100. It's 100 for $20. So you can't go wrong with that. That's it helps to prevent MRSA and all kinds of stuff at those levels. So anyway, folks, as I say, I don't have a commission from Indigo.com, but that's one I did find that had the test strips to allow us to follow the instructions at Clorox and the instructions in Holly's book for the things that we need to protect ourselves against Ebola should we be potentially exposed to it at the stores or anywhere else. But it's going to be a time where we need to prepare in advance. When word gets out that this is spread, if it does, word gets out it's spreading through the United States, people are going to race, run, rush to get their Clorox, the right kind, and there won't be any because there's not enough for everybody in the country to buy it once. So I advise you to get it now. And not only that, you're going to want to limit a lot of your outings for a while if this starts to be widespread. You just can't be careful enough when you're out in the community when something like this gets loose. There's going to be some odd accident happens that you'll get it. So I'm saying it's not a good time to be traveling, staying in hotels and stuff unless you just have to. It's more of a time to hunker down in your bunker, your home, and have a lot of food there so that you don't, like freeze-dried food, so you don't have to go out and get it. Have water stored. Certainly the chlorine water coming through your water pipes in most cities should be safe enough to drink. We have stored extra, thousands of gallons of water here just in case the water stops pumping or gets polluted or whatever. But this is an urgent situation. This is not if Ebola comes to America. It is here, and hopefully it will be contained. But if it's not, we have to prepare at home. You become your own defense station there at home. And so, I'm just trying to remember what things you need. Swabs, you need Scott towels, you need latex gloves, the surgical type gloves you can get at the store so that you can keep your hands protected. And, hopefully no one in your own home would get the Ebola and bring it home. But if it does, they'll have to be taken into medical care because it's just almost impossible to rehydrate because you have to do it with IVs and to cure or help anyone that's sick like this in your home without everyone getting it. So as soon as they do show signs, they have to leave your home and you have to sterilize your home to be hopefully not getting exposed to it yourself. I know this sounds terrible, but you've got to try to limit it. That's the only thing that's worked in West Africa at the moment is isolating the sites and letting the Ebola virus die out or be killed out with spray.
My question, and I received an email from Kelly in Nebraska, stating, this is one case that we know of. It's very possible that there are other cases that will show up in the near future. I mean, think about the fact that this guy sat in an airplane. We don't know. I'm sure that they cleaned the planes, obviously, but not to the extent that perhaps would kill off that type of virus. Think about the person sitting in the seat, maybe from Iowa, for example, and he goes to Iowa, and he rubs, the previous passenger, the one the patient, the Ebola patient, sat in his seat. Of course, maybe he gets some of his sweat on him or his mucus secretions on him.
The guy could just wipe his eyes or something and put his hand back on his headrest or his handrest.
Right. So we're looking at a situation that is many levels more exponentially deeper, I suspect.
You saw the press conference, and so did I, where the head of the CDC said that they had caught him in time because he had no signatures of it, no fever, anything when he was on that plane. Now that I'm trusting that guy is telling the truth, which is an awful lot to ask. But even if he was telling the truth, the fact that others could be infected from other sources is a huge possibility, and it is well known in military circles that the poor man's atomic bomb is bacterial or viral infection. And, with the ISIS threatening to come into America, into Australia, and Europe, all they have got to do is go gather some, bodily fluids, whether it be blood or whatever, from somebody that has died with it or is in the process of dying in West Africa, put it into containers, get into the United States through our very porous southern border, and put it into the consumer chain somewhere. I mean, where it's going to spread rapidly, whether it be on a bus, with passenger on a bus, whether it be in water, on an aircraft, or whether it be in food chain. All they've got to do is that, and suddenly the game is on, and a lot of us are going to get sick.
Stan, Oscar from Seattle, listening live. Hello, Oscar, and family, by the way, wants to know how long does the Ebola virus, this particular strain, which I've dubbed the Obama strain,
the what now?
The Obama strain, after the Andromeda strain. But anyway, how long does this last? Does for example, if a guy sneezes, if this patient zero, so to speak, sneezes, and the mucousy substance lands on, we'll say, a handrail, how long does the virus live in that?
Well, a lot of things. It depends on a lot of things. The temperature, the relative humidity in the air at the time, the disease itself can manifest once you've got it within 3 to 10 days. You'll start getting the fever and the symptoms, and within 21 days you're either dead or in a hospital getting fixed. Now, outside the body, it varies from virus to virus, and there are several strains of this Ebola virus, Oscar. So I don't know. The short answer is I don't know how long you have after a surface has been exposed before it dies. I will try to look that up during the show here and see.
When you said there are different strains, different strains of Ebola here that we're talking about. So we don't really, we're not sure exactly what strain this guy has.
Well, I'm quoting the CDC director this afternoon on his newscast. He said on this particular strain of Ebola, and I just assume that means that there's Ebola type A, B, C, D, or whatever.
Boy, I missed that. Okay, thank you for being so astute in this. Yeah, I missed that.
I was watching that, glued to that. Let me tell you, boy.
Wow. Okay.
That's serious stuff. Okay. Now, I've just found a note here, pathogen safety on surfaces, Ebola virus safety sheet. This is out of Canada. It's also known as African hemorrhagic fever. Okay, characteristics, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'll keep searching. It's a long article here, but it's got something about it on surfaces, and that will tell us the answer to Oscar's query. Let's see here. Nope, that's not it. Okay. Survival outside the host. It is a filovirus, and they've been reported capable to survive for weeks in blood. It can also survive on contaminated surfaces, particularly at low temperatures of 10 or 15 degrees Fahrenheit. And let's see, relative humidity. Okay, amount of virus reduced to 37% after 16 hours. Some have stored in low temperatures under 10 degrees Fahrenheit for over 50 days in dry tissue cultures. So, yeah,
50 days? Is that what
that's in a freezing situation. When dried in tissue culture media on the glass and stored at 4 degrees centigrade, the Zaire strain of Ebola virus, I think that's probably the one we're talking about, survived for 50 days. It's only on experimental research, and it's not been based, outside the laboratory as a fact. But I'd say that between 1 day and a week, you might have stuff that's still contagious on hard surfaces where it's been deposited. So, gosh, guys, do the best you can, and let God do the rest, because at this stage, it's just going to be what we used to call a crapshoot. It's going to be incredibly random about how it gets you, and you're going to have to look on all sides.
Stan, any evidence or anything have you heard as far as this being potentially airborne, aside from initial fears and theories?
Well, again, the CDC has said that this particular strain, the Zaire strain, is at present has to be passed by bodily fluids and a significant amount. Now, they didn't say what that was, but anyway, they did say in other articles I read that, in fact, he even mentioned it, the CDC director mentioned it, that there are viruses known to mutate when going from one host to another. Now, normally you think about that as going from a human to a pig or a dog or bird or whatever, and back and forth, and the mutation has formed a different way that we can't fight. Now, it might be that it mutates from the Negro population, the black population of Africa, and it comes to the United States and forms a mutation with the white folks, principally Europeans, that will be more virulent or less virulent than what they've got in Africa. One thing we have in our favor here in the States is that we are, hygiene-wise, much more cautious and than they are in the underdeveloped countries. It's just the fact of the matter. It's not a choice. It's just the way they have to live. So here, with sanitation being high on our priority list, personally, I think we will see that we could be able to control these things a lot better than what is happening in West Africa. They have managed to stop the spread of it in Nigeria with the containment protocol they put in place there, and the CDC of the United States was involved in that. So it is possible that it can be contained here. So I don't want people to panic, but there's no sense in you not being prepared just in case. You can't get everything prepared for everything, obviously, whether it be a disease or lightning strike or meteor impact or financial collapse, whatever, but you can make certain types of preparations that you can afford and you can store in your home and prepare your family with. And this one here has been one that has bothered us, Holly and I, for a long time, that people need to be aware and need to be prepared. I mean, I wear gloves. I wear leather gloves when I go into Walmart now. I haven't started wearing a face mask, but it might be an idea as things progress. At the moment, we just got flu to worry about. And there are 5 strains of it that they're inoculating people for now here in the Southwest. I don't know about the rest of the country. And Doug, you may have gotten one of those. I don't know, that cause you to cough up, blood and stuff. So it's loose. The flu virus is loose, and so in that respect alone, doing some of the things I'm talking about to protect yourself, sanitation-wise, when you're in public places, is a good idea.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
yeah, you're right. And I mean, I remember 10 years ago when I was in Canada, seeing a lot of Chinese people wearing those masks back then. But the fears of contamination. But my biggest concern is the lack of the way that they're letting travel continue on, with this being such a stated epidemic, and how it has unfolded. The unrestriction when it comes to travel is a huge concern for me. And as you stated earlier, Stan, I would agree 100% that if you don't have to travel anywhere, do not travel. Avoid public transportation at all costs until we see what kind of situation we're dealing with here in the United States.
I know that the CDC director was, I don't know him personally, but I could just kind of listen to his manner and his presentation. I think that he's not a politician, not in the main, and I think that his objective was to say, look, don't panic. We're almost positive we've got this thing under control, and I agree. I mean, it's not a time to panic, but it is a time to prepare, just in case. I mean, it doesn't take a heck of a lot of dollars to prepare, to sterilize your house and to protect yourself against what might come, on your food at the grocery store or whatever. And knowing that the ISIS or IS or whatever they're called now, the nasties, knowing that they have openly said in the next month to 2 months they're coming into the United States and they're going to clobber America. It's going to be worse than 9/11. And when something like Ebola gets loose, and it is out of the laboratory now, it's out where they can get it just with scooping it up, putting it in a jar somewhere, you got to believe that they're going to go take the poor man's atomic bomb and come for America, right through our porous borders, thanks to the current administration. Gosh. We are in trouble. You're right, Doug. We're in trouble.
Well, yeah, and I don't see this ending well. Even if they manage to contain, or nothing happens from the situation, this is just one person, one event, one time, until the next time. And we're looking perhaps at the next time. I mean, it's bound to happen. That's my view anyway. Before we switch topics, Stan, any other comments about the situation that we need to really cover, strike home?
Well, other than, getting those test strips for your chlorine, that's important to know how strong it is so that you got the right strength from your Clorox to disinfect. Just look around your house and make a list of things should you need to start disinfecting your house. Look at things that where people's hands touch, or where they put their lips around it or something, I mean, it can be in the shower heads, the shower handle. It can be in your phone receivers. I mean, phones are really used by everyone. Your car keys, your wallets, your belts, belt buckles, zippers, all kinds of things like that. Start thinking about what you would need to spray periodically should you think that you're running the risk of being exposed to something like this. I mean, this will help you with flu viruses as well as Ebola. So this flu season is going to be particularly busy, and it might save you being sick from that as well. And you can get this nice. Okay, now that's enough fun.
All right. Yeah. Wow.
In the world here. But there. I'm sure you've been kind of seeing some mentions of this with the increase in earthquakes and volcanoes in various places, of interest. I mean, Mount St. Helens is starting to warm up again, and it's raised over 1,000 feet, probably closer to 1,100 feet up above the floor there. You can see in the show images page there, I've got a picture of the second row right-hand side, Mount St. Helens with, little steam coming out of it. And we need to be aware that Mount St. Helens, like the volcanoes in Iceland, the volcano in Japan at Ontake, all these are in the northern hemisphere in various tectonic plate border regions. Mount St. Helens is inland land, but but it's between the continental shore or the tectonic plate border off of Washington State and Yellowstone, which is a very volatile area. Now they say, it could be a number of years more before Mount St. Helens actually blows like it did in 1980 some odd, whenever it last blew. But it is building up for another eruption, and you can find that on the website. You can click and look at the article there. Is Mount St. Helens starting to wake up? And I think people should, in the area, should certainly be aware of that, and downwind from that should be aware of that as well.
Stan, we have a question from a listener, Margot, who asked, recently there is a huge swarm of earthquakes around Mammoth area in California. Is this a common occurrence, or is there something else stirring? And does it have anything to do with the pressure building toward Cascadia?
Well, we do periodically have little swarms in Mammoth Valley there in the eastern, southeastern part of California. Certainly this has been rather interesting, this current little spate of them. It's very localized and doesn't seem to be spreading along the fault line too far, so it's probably more volcanism or magma movements in that area. I would certainly be watching that. I am, and thanks to Kim, who periodically takes time off of her busy schedule to collect the data for me. She's been watching it too, and there have been a number of them, hundreds, that are of concern in that area. But I think they may pass for the moment. If you look on our show images page, the top row, first one on the left, it shows a picture of the United States last 7 days worth of earthquakes that are, 2.5 or above. And you'll see there, right next to the word San Francisco, on the O of Francisco, you'll see a bunch of little yellow dots on top of each other, and that's the Mammoth earthquake swarm she's talking about. We're also having an interesting development with the swarms of earthquakes in Oklahoma, northern Oklahoma. We've known about the fracking and all that kind of stuff for some time there. But now then, they're starting to move up into Kansas above Oklahoma. And that is kind of interesting to me that it's now moving, and I'm wondering if are they fracking up into Kansas or what? But it's certainly developing there. And there's been one, I think, in the last month, one earthquake over in the New Madrid hot zone. I'll show there that kind of red zone down along the Mississippi. So we're keeping an eye on that. There's nothing happening there at present, but certainly all these earthquakes are we should be taking a look at them for sure. I'm more concerned, I think, with the volcanic activity. Interestingly enough, in the UPI news site, on their science news, today they showed an article that was entitled "Antarctic Ice Loss Responsible for Measurable Shift in Gravity. With less ice in Antarctica, the strength of Earth's gravity is shrinking." Now, that's a misleading title, and if any of your listeners have caught that, it's shrinking in various spots on the southern part of the planet, but the mass of our planet has not changed. Our gravity, on average, is the same as it was, last year. But there are hot spots where gravity is weakening because the ice is melting, and they show these pictures of the ice where 0.5 millimeter a year sea level is occurring near the Amundsen sea sector of the South Pole. And gravity, as a result, in that area is weakening, but only a tiny amount that a satellite alone can detect. I mean, you might weigh 0.001% less if you stood there versus New York City, but it's just saying that the effect that causes gravity, the mass concentration, is being changed enough to significantly make a satellite's orbit wobble a bit as it goes over this area, and that's how they detect that.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now, all right, I'll get back to what we were talking about there. With the wobble, if you go to the show images page, with the wobble in the Earth's axis, in shows past this year, I've talked about the fact that the North Pole itself, the magnetic pole, is wobbling faster, twice as fast as the South Pole, and that there are two north-south pole pairs inside of our planet, one in the northern hemisphere, one in the southern. And this wobbling in the northern hemisphere, to me, indicates that it's like a top, and the bottom of it doesn't move as fast as the top as it wobbles. It's trying to slow down a bit. And as a result, I'm seeing volcanic activity in the mid-latitudes of, like from Japan over to Washington State, over to Iceland. And Iceland, talk about a volcanic fissure. Iceland is huge there at the moment, and in the last, 7 days or so, they've been, I don't know, 7 days, but in this last surge of eruptions, they've had 25,000 quakes since August the 29th underneath those volcanoes and the fissures there in Iceland. And if you'll go to the Show Images page, there's a little link to go over to Iceland's volcanoes, and you'll see all current information. They're showing current depths of the earthquakes underneath these volcanoes, the fiery fissure, and infrared satellite pictures from orbit, that kind of stuff, showing that this is not asleep, and they're still trying to figure out whether we're going to have more volcanic activity, more earthquake activity. And there is a link you can go to there where I talk about the seismic activities unchanged, as of 4 days ago, at Bardabunga, the major volcano there, but it's only one of two that are really important. And that one's a Halruhan volcano, and right now it's spitting out more sulfur dioxide than the entire all of Europe, and this is important because this is affecting quote unquote global warming. It is affecting the greenhouse gas content of the planet. I hope it stops soon, but anyway, that's the volcanic activity is something that we do need to keep an eye on, and with the earthquake activity, again, I think that what we're seeing is an expansion of the Earth accompanied by a wobble in the Earth. It's beginning. The magnetic pole is wobbling, and perhaps now then we're going to see the physical spin axis of the planet start to wobble more than it is. We'll just have to keep an eye on that and see, but these kind of changes are increasing. I'm sure of that. It doesn't take blind Freddy to see that.
Is this the same, and I'm looking at an email here, is all of this, what you've talked about here in the last few moments, is this related to the increased activity Long Valley caldera situation?
Well, that's what that person was asking about, that swarm, right?
Right, correct. Well, this is from I believe a different person.
I think it could be. It could be. It's certainly that area there, the Long Valley caldera mammoth, is a weakened area. It's above a much weaker area in the Salton Sea area of Southern California. It's hundreds of miles away, but it's along the same fault line. And I do know from past major earthquakes in the Salton Sea area that it is like a flimsy, thin portion of the crust there, and it rattles much longer than other places when they have a series of aftershocks. At the Salton Sea area, it's longer running, more aftershocks than in other places because it's so flimsy there. So if we have that area connected to which we do by fault lines up to, it's a divider fault line that runs east-west, it goes underneath Nevada and through Los Angeles sideways. But, this could shake up that one as well. It would be a right angle shake, but it could do it and affect the Long Valley situation. So all of these things, I think the best advice I can give is people to look at, to get the USGS feed every day and have a look at the patterns. Look over 7 days, look over 30 days, and see where these things are developing. The migration pattern of the earthquakes over Oklahoma, going up into Kansas, is another kind of indicator to me that things are moving north in the instabilities. And the further north you get, the bigger the instabilities become, which I attribute to this sloshing around, if you wish, inside the planet of the magnetic core, in the northern hemisphere. there's just a lot of things we're having to rethink, guys. It wasn't until just a few months back this year that NASA got the magnetic information that was so detailed to show us that we had 2 north-south pole pairs in the planet. We always thought we had one, North Pole, South Pole, simple. But no, we're like the sun. We've got 2 pairs. We've got a north-south in the northern hemisphere, north-south in the southern hemisphere, and they're flipping. So, yeah, things are difficult to predict when things are so changing. I mean, so radically changing.
Wow. Yeah, that surprises me to hear. How close in proximity are we talking about the 2 north, or we'll say the 2 north poles or the 2 south poles? How close? I mean,
they're thousands of miles apart.
Okay.
Let's see, where have I got that here? I think I might have it somewhere. I'll look and see. And again, this is on the imaging that they took earlier this year and put it together. Let's see. I'm looking very quickly through my image file here. I don't see it in that file there, but maybe I can find it here online. Just give me a second and I'll look it up. What do we say? North, South, poles, NASA. I'll tell you what, without this genie in the bottle, the Google Earth type thing or the Google search engine, we'd be in trouble, wouldn't we?
I'll tell you, it's amazing when you think about the information at your fingertips.
I know. You just say, oh, well, I don't know about that. Let me press a button here. Mirror, mirror on the wall, tell me what's going on. Google in my computer. Okay, there they are. That's the turbulent zone. Yeah, they're thousands of miles apart, it looks like, in what I can see in the in a reversal stage. But they say that NASA says that during a reversal stage, you will see, two at least pairs of north-south, and maybe more in the turbulent core of the planet when it starts to completely flip. And as you know, when I was talking, investigating the Garden of Eden and compressing time down, instead of like 100 million years ago that Pangea split apart, it was like 4,000 or 5,000 years ago that it split apart. Then when you say, okay, according to normal timing, geophysical timing, that the north-south pole reverses, maybe every 10,000 to 100,000 years, something like that. But if you compress that down like it did the rest of the time, it's the North and South Pole, they reverse every, what time is it now?
That's pretty good. Yeah. Good and frightening nonetheless.
Just days ago, the USA Today was talking about how soon the magnetic poles of the Earth might reverse. And, Scientific American is saying within 2,000 years. And again, if you compress that figure by that normal compression of time that I was talking about, it really would be, look at your watch and see what time it is. The next one's due.
Your presentation, by the way, Stan, I'll tell you this on air, your presentation about the Garden of Eden is still one of our most popular downloaded broadcasts ever. So many people have access to that. It's just the numbers are incredible behind that.
Really?
Yeah, and I've just got to say that your analysis, in particular, the compression of time, in particular that rethinking that whole process of the whether it's a calendar month or a year or 1,000 years, it's an amazing. It focuses on an amazing presentation, and but Stan, yeah. So I mean,
I backed into that, Doug. I mean,
how so?
I started researching for another lecture I was going to do on the Earth expansion before I did that Garden of Eden thing, and that's what I was going to do my lecture on. Then I pulled up the maps and I started working backwards, seeing riverbeds and stuff with the new data I got from Scripps Institute, and put that onto Google Earth and I had a look at it, and I thought, wow. And so, one thing led, and I found the Garden of Eden, but only if Pangea didn't break up 100 million years ago, and if it broke up around 4,300 years ago. And that's when I had to then get out of finding the Garden of Eden, like the Indiana Deyo stuff, and go over to scientific Deyo and say, well, now wait a minute, if that's the case, then we're going to have to rethink the age of dinosaurs. We're going to have to rethink, all of time. It's going to be compressed, and all of our dating methods are up the spout. Now, that's a mighty leap to take to go there from finding the Garden of Eden. But that's what it dictated. When I found the Garden of Eden there, it meant that all the other stuff had to change in science. And it's not going to be popular, I can tell you that right now. But anyway,
not going to be popular because of the faith factor, I suspect, right? Is that what you mean?
Well, it's not going to be popular because at the Cathedral of Science and Physics and Geophysics, you are trained one way. You get your master's and your doctorates by being peer-reviewed, and you have positions in universities or in corporate society based upon your adherence to what was accepted. And this is going to make so many people have to review their dating concepts and their, nuclear physics even, that it's just so hard to contemplate that they would rather say, you don't have any degrees, Deyo, you're wrong. And that's why it's going to be, not well received in the established, cathedral of science. For those of us that can think out of the box and are truly scientific, we can say, well, okay, suppose Deyo is right. Let us see if we can fit other things to that hypothesis to make it a working theory. And, I'm the first one in line trying to break my theory or my hypothesis apart, saying, well, now, okay, but you say this, well, let's work with this, and how do you explain such and such? And there are so many of these things to fit and test that it's going to take me the rest of my life probably to do it. But that's what it takes. It's like Copernicus saying, actually the sun and everything else doesn't revolve around the Earth. The Earth actually revolves around the sun, and that revolves around the galactic center. Oh, no, that's totally backwards to everything we ever thought. And but that's where we are at the moment. This simple little discovery of the location of the Garden of Eden, working it back, meant that I would then have to take that over to the scientific community and say, oh, you've got to make changes too. And here's the proof. How could mankind, whoever wrote this document, how could they have known that this river went here, that river went there before Pangea broke up, unless all the continents were together before 2342 BC, and they broke up around that time in the next 100 years. So, I'm asking a question to them now, then, which, unless they're really got nothing to do, they're not going to take the time to answer. They're just going to dismiss me out of hand. But
that's an easy way to handle the topic. Any topic is just to dismiss a person out of hand. That's a great tactic.
If they will accept that that's the Garden of Eden, I mean, there's just no way that I can find at the moment to discredit myself. I've tried to say I was wrong, and looked this way and that way. If we can prove that, to their satisfaction, that is the Garden of Eden there next to the Omo Valley and next to the Leakeys, discovering the oldest hominid bones on the earth, if they will accept that, then they're going to have to reevaluate their time scale. They're going to have to.
Wow, absolutely.
We're getting the DVDs ready. I've been kind of distracted on a lot of projects here that we had to get done around the house for winter, but I'm just about finished all the artwork for the DVDs of the actual lectures, and those should be hopefully ready to start distributing mid-October to third week. But they're mainly waiting on me to finish the artwork, which I've just about done, and then people will be able to see the lecture.
So people can purchase just your lecture?
Yeah, it'll be my lecture on that and my lecture on Solomon, Satan, and Seduction. The fact that the Antichrist is going to be named Solomon and why, the Bible says that, and who some of the potential candidates for that are in the Middle East at the moment in Al-Nusra. And then there is I think it's about a 30-minute interview with Derek Gilbert. But the day I was going to make the press release on the Garden of Eden, well, it was about an hour. Let's see, no, that was in the morning. It was about 8 hours before I was going to give the lecture that night, and he was trying to get me to tell where the Garden of Eden was. And I said, no, Derek, look, I promised people here that bought tickets to come to this, they would be the first to know, and I've held it secret for only 5 people in my family know about it. And anyway, we had a dance around that a bit, and he interviewed me, and that's going to be on the DVDs. There's 2 of them, and then a CD-ROM I'm putting in there, which will have all kinds of links to things on Google Earth that will allow you to follow the riverbeds and look at the countries and the mineral maps and things like I did. Because of copyright, I could not show I couldn't screen snap or take a picture of what Google Earth's data showed me, but I can make what's called a KMZ or a KML file, and you can just plug that into your Google Earth, which is free, and it will allow you to then fly over various areas, go down, zoom in, and see the riverbeds that I followed, and everything. They're just so that'll all be on a CD-ROM that you can slip in your computer and have a lot of fun. There's like hundreds of images that you'll want to see inside the Garden of Eden.
Can you give us a cost estimate on the DVD?
Oh Lord, we haven't even gotten that far yet. DVDs. You'd probably be looking at under $40 for the package. It's 2 DVDs and a CD-ROM, I think, but that's just a guess because nobody's come in yet with the costings of the printing and pressing, but I'm pretty sure we can do it for that. We're going to try anyway.
No, that's reasonable. Great, okay. I got a question from Larry in California. Wants to know, kind of different topic here, Stan, about we haven't heard diddly about Fukushima. What's the deal what's going on with Fukushima right now?
I don't know. I haven't been following Fukushima. I've been more concerned about our own nuclear reactors on fault lines that are suspect, and what would happen or what will happen when those are compromised by either terrorist activity or loss of power in the grid from terrorist activity or earthquake activity that dislodges some of our own reactors. So I do apologize. Fukushima was, to me that was okay. That's loose. It's doing whatever it's doing, but we've got potential for 100 times that damage here in the United States from our own stuff. Right. So I'm looking at home. Sorry, Guy.
Oh no! I mean, believe me, it's a target-rich environment of headlines and news stories.
Isn't it?
Oh man.
Yeah. Anyway,
looking at the sunspots, there are a few sunspots that are appearing to face Earth, and we're seeing from spaceweather.com and a few other solar sites that they see a potential for possible M-class to a few X-class flares earthbound, especially AR 2177. That's just coming to
I know that one in the northwest. Yeah,
and
hey,
the way that the sun's been spitting out, these ejections, we've been fortunate not to have too many real close earthbound ejections. And I know we've talked about how this solar cycle has been really a bust when it comes to the solar maximum cycle. It's more like a solar minimum cycle. Are you still keeping an eye out for the potential for, I don't know, a huge increase or a fast, rapid chance that we could see a couple of the sun, really heat up here before it goes back into a more dormant period?
Oh yeah, I'm still keeping an eye on it because even where you're looking at that sunspot group that they say is geoeffective, if it makes an X-class flare, it'll head right straight for Earth and hit us straight on. In AR 2177. If you look in the H-alpha hydrogen alpha line photo of that, which is not visible light, it's in the H-alpha line, you'll see something very interesting. You'll see in fact, Space Weather, I think, let me just see, Space Weather, yeah, they've still got a picture of it up there on the underneath where they show the sunspots. You'll see that there's kind of an orange-looking picture, and that's what they call an H-alpha. Okay, now you'll see right underneath where that sunspot is they're talking about, that 2177, that there's a great tear in the surface of the sun. You can see it. There's one there, and there's one that's just passed us by. Now, those are the kind of things I'm interested in, because when you don't have the sunspots, which are normally little black areas like that, but you have these, it's showing a surface disturbance that might do what I'm expecting, and see a lot more flares and coronal mass ejections than we have seen in past solar cycles. Just because this is a minimum number of sunspots does not preclude the sun behaving very erratically and emitting, MNX class flares more rapidly, more frequently than they have been in the past. So don't be lulled to sleep thinking, well, we haven't had many sunspots, so don't worry about the sun. The number of solar physicists are saying this cycle is unusual, and I think you put that in quotes and couch it with the same thing that the Chinese say, may you live in interesting times. It's just quote-unquote unusual times with the sun. So look at the H-alphas and look for these tears underneath a sunspot or potential sunspot areas, and that's what you want to look at. On the left-hand side, as the sun is turning, you want to look for those big kind of dark brown areas that aren't quite penetrating through the outer layer of the sun there, like a sunspot would, but they're in the surface. And it's these surface disturbances that can evolve into, well, like fissures. Instead of a sunspot, a sun fissure, a fissure like a sunspot, but long tearing things. And these can create some very interesting emissions from the sun in visible and particulate ejections.
Very good. Okay.
Yeah. Look, there are a number of sites that give you pictures of the sun's surface in various wavelengths that filter out things that you don't need to see, so you can concentrate on that kind of stuff. So if you do that, you'll be able to keep an eye on the health of the sun more so than just sunspots.
Understood. Stan, is there anything that we didn't cover tonight that we should have, or anything else you want to add here? We don't want to keep you beyond your allotted time or the time you have for us, but if you have anything else, certainly feel free to toss it in the mix.
Well, I guess you probably already talked about that clown that cut his fellow workers' head off, and they're calling it a workplace anxiety or workplace activity rather than a terrorist activity. And they got a picture of him in his beard and his little skull cap from his Muslim faith that he just joined. And now he worked in a food plant there in Moore, Oklahoma. So if terrorists like him are sleepers in food supplies to the rest of the nation, instead of cutting off somebody's head, he could drop something in the food that they're making. You see what I'm saying?
You know what, Stan? I do, and I got to tell you this. I decided to tell all, if you will. Working as an operational asset for some government agencies back following the attacks of 9/11, I had done some covert surveillance operations of terrorist training camps, paramilitary training camps, and the like here in the U.S., including some mosques and some schools and what have you. Having said that, I decided to tell all the first installment is on our website. It's evidence of paramilitary terrorist training in the United States. The reason I mention that is because I believe what we're seeing here in the form of this guy, I truly believe that we're looking at having trained Muslims that have been trained in paramilitary type activities that are latent here in the U.S. And I don't know what their go signal would be or will be, and I'm sure that there will be some like this killer, and perhaps even Hassan, Adel Hassan, might have been part of this as well. But I think we're in trouble here as well, Stan, with respect to the embedded, infiltrated
the sleepers, the fifth elements.
Yeah, absolutely. I really believe that. And I'm putting up pictures that I have not put up before of evidence of paramilitary training, including some rappelling activities, a school bus that's bullet-ridden, and some other things too. So
is that I'm just looking at evidence of Islamic terror threat within our borders. Is that the one?
That's the one. And
look at that.
Yep. Yeah. That's the introduction to the series. And like I said, we turned over a lot. And I got to tell you, Stan, what really bothered me the most is, I felt that we could do something right after 9/11 in an investigative capacity to assist the government. Well, that's all fine, well, and good, except when our information was taken, and before the ink was even dry on the reports, the targets of our investigations or the subjects of our investigations knew the results, knew the reports, knew what was inside the reports, and that only happens with government collusion. That's not mere incompetence. Yeah, it's ridiculous. So at that point, I knew something was totally backwards and wrong. So the other reason I mentioned that is because I do believe we're going to see more and more of these incidents of so-called workplace violence, and it's going to become a joke, you know. But go ahead, sir.
The barbarians are not at the gate; they're in the state.
Yeah.
Very well said.
It is. Yeah, sorry.
Any media appearances, upcoming interviews that you have scheduled that you want to promote?
There are a few, but I can't remember. Let me just see if Holly's put them up on the website here.
No, I looked, and you got September pretty well covered, but nothing coming up beyond today.
All right, let me just check the calendar because I only tell her at the beginning of the week usually what's happening. So I'm trying to slow down a bit because I need to get these DVDs out for people. We're getting so many requests that I just okay. All right, we've got you there. Okay, I'm looking. Actually, well, there's one called The Week in Conspiracy on the 11th of October. Another one on the 12th of October on Sukkot with Jim Paris Live. Of course, all of our Tuesday regulars with you guys. And I think that's all I've got scheduled ahead at the moment.
All right. Well, we'll definitely keep, let us know, and we'll promote whatever media appearances you have. But, Stan, it's been great. It's great to hear you, man. You sound really good, and we really appreciate all of the information, especially the Ebola information that you have given us. We really appreciate that.
Well, okay. We'll see you next week, if not before, sir.
Stan, God bless you. God bless Holly. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Stan. Folks, we're going to go to our top of the hour months, the holiday seasons of Thanksgiving and Christmas not too far away, and time just flies, I tell you. We barely even had a summer, and we're talking about the ending of fall and winter coming already. It's just, I hope that this winter goes as fast as this summer went. Usually they drag on, but
go ahead. Hold on, that hope. It just seems like we're running out of. You know what, folks? It doesn't seem like we're running out of money before the month. In other words, the months are recycling so fast. For example, probably your rent or mortgage is due tomorrow, right? A lot of things are due on the first of the month. People are having a hard time. The economy is not doing well. Of course, if you're listening to the carnival barkers on the media, they'll tell you everything's fine. I did see a clip of Jim Cramer. Did you play this, Joe? I think this is when I was in my haze of illness. Jim Cramer saying, "Bye, Bear Stearns." It's a goodbye. Okay.
No,
I
did
saw a clip of that. Oh my word, I was laughing. Anyway, but folks, we understand. We're with you as you are going through these tough economic times. We're praying for you. Also, I want to let you know we talked to Paul Begley this afternoon. He lost his voice for a while.
Yeah, he had to have a few scopes done. He didn't even have a broadcast yesterday. Some type of antacid issue that is treatable. He said I think it'd take about 6 weeks before he'd be back to normal. And speaking of Paul Begley, he's going to be on our show a week from tomorrow, next Wednesday, and that is the day of the second blood moon. That is the 8th of October, and we'll be on his show that day also in the afternoon from 1 to 3, and then he'll be on our show. But the rest of this week, tomorrow, my dad and I will be on, and we'll be discussing the satanic agenda behind the New World Order, and we're going to get into some really good stuff tomorrow. Just me and my dad.
And Joe, I've got a homework assignment for the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're so inclined, if you can find I think it was the September issue of the Bazaar magazine, magazine Bazaar. I believe that's the name of it.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, it's entertainment, Hollywood magazine, glossy. On the cover is Katy Perry. Check out the ring that she is wearing, and also check out the directionality of the object of that ring. That's going to be part of our discussion tomorrow. Kind of a little tip-off, a homework assignment, if you will.
I just found I think this is it. It looks rather...
don't give anything away now.
Yeah, I don't know here. But anyway, upcoming this week, I wanted to give you guys a schedule this week. Tomorrow we are going to be talking about the satanic agenda behind the New World Order and the Illuminati. Thursday we'll be joined by V, the guerrilla economist. Friday we have a great show lined up for you with Steve Quayle and Henry Groover. Henry Groover is a fantastic spiritual man who has just phenomenal stories and insight.
He just got back from Asia.
Yeah, he travels across the globe and ministers to people all across the globe, and has been saved by the Lord in many situations. One of the more famous ones is he left Japan just a few hours before that massive earthquake and tsunami hit. And then next week into Wednesday we have Pastor Paul Begley, and then Thursday possibly Paul McGuire will be on next week, most likely Thursday if that's all right with him, but he does want to come back on. And we did get his book today, or at least I got it today, Standing Down Goliath, his latest book. Can't wait to read it. It is smaller than his last book, but looks to be very interesting. And Nephilim DNA, cyborgs, artificial intelligence, nanochips, world brain, prophecy, Babylon Stargate, virtual reality, American Matrix, and interdimensional Armageddon.
It actually picks up where a prophecy of the future of America leaves off. It kind of digs a little bit deeper into some of the topics. It advances the topical matter from a prophecy of the future of America. So I still am a big fan of the prophecy of the future of America. I think that's the quintessential book that he has written, and I think that this book, Standing Down Goliath, is just such a great compliment to it. So you're right, Joe. It's fantastic.
Well, let's go to the phones. We got a full bank of callers, and we appreciate you guys holding tonight. We're going to go to area code 267 first. 267, you're up. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
Hey, God bless you guys. Could you hear me?
Yeah, God bless you too. What's on your mind?
Yeah, this is Eric from Philadelphia. Just wanted to call and confirm with multiple trucker friends of mine. They've reported like a large shipment of those disposable caskets. You know what I'm talking about, right? Those caskets that I guess the military uses to dispose of bodies. So they've given me a few calls. They're like, hey, you know what? You're not that crazy after all. We're trying to get some film of this. And I guess just about a week ago, since it was creating a buzz, a lot of people were getting suspicious around the Deptford, New Jersey area. So anyone that lives around there that might be a trucker could also
say that
confirm
again.
on that.
Which area again, sir? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so these are trucker friends of mine that are, I guess, dropping off loads around the Deptford, New Jersey area, and they gave me some phone calls about those disposable caskets, I guess, that the military uses, that there was a huge shipment, I mean, thousands of them, and, they just gave me a call today that they were relocated because there was a lot of people just really looking into it and like, wow, what are all these caskets coming in for? So I just find it odd with the Ebola thing breaking out and getting a big buzz. You just add two and two together,
Well, if you happen to be able to catch any or grab any video, photos, or whatever, certainly, if you don't mind, send them to us via our studio. You go to our studio or HagmanandHagmann.com, click on Contact Us, and you can send us a link to them or the images themselves, if you can. Interesting observation. Why do you think that they would be moved there? What's your thought on that?
I mean, I don't know about the location. I just know that the sources are definitely solid because these are truckers, and as you know, with truckers, they get the scoop on what really comes in, and they get a unique perspective on certain things. So I really trust the source. They're Christian individuals, and actually, throughout your ministry, we've created our own ministry of just people that are awake. So everything that is going on is not in vain as far as what you guys do, sounding the alarm. There's a great deal of people that are waking up and just bringing pieces of the puzzle together. I mean, truckers, people that work in different areas of expertise. You don't sound, all those people that are really sounding an alarm and really feel that no one's hearing. Now is the time that a lot of people are going to really start taking heed to the so-called conspiracy theorists, crazy people that have been sounding an alarm for so long. But yeah, Deptford, New Jersey area, anyone that's around there that knows about the situation, definitely it's been confirmed. Last I heard, they've started shipping them out because so many people are just trying to inquire about them in that area. So anyone that's a trucker, anyone that's in that area that could kind of confirm that, call in and So these caskets are really troubling because the timing is really impeccable.
Very good. We really appreciate your call, your observations, and God bless you, my friend. And thanks for saying that, it's not in vain. Sometimes we think it is, but lately we've been getting emails saying, more people are waking up, and it's a good thing, perhaps just in the nick of time. God bless you, my friend.
Yeah. God bless you. Good night.
Great caller. Thank you for that call. And just to let you know, caller, there are people in the chat room saying in Georgia, they have seen the same things, and in many other states across the southeast there are similar sightings. And as the caller stated, anybody out there who has seen them, call in as far as seeing movements of the equipment and these types of things. Definitely give us a call. We're going to go to area code 862 next. 862. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann report.
Hi.
Good evening.
Doug, it really blessed my heart to hear you when you answered, when you opened the show yesterday, because when Steve put out the request for all the prayers, you got rained down from prayers from around the world simultaneously.
Well, I tell you, thank you so very much, everyone. I feel very lucky to have an extended family of like yourself and others. I really feel very blessed, and I know Joe does too. We all do. And I was talking with a couple of other talk show hosts in doing the same thing as we're doing, and it seems like we're all under a certain level of attack. It's everyone I've spoken to, caller, I got to tell you, they're going through their own situation.
Yeah, and I got to say, some are outwardly manifested, as we saw with my dad and Pastor Paul and these different ailments. Even Russ Dizdar had an issue of a leg injury, and others are going through personal struggles, personal battles. Others are going through family issues and battles. It is a spiritual war that is being waged against all believers, and it is ramping up because the devil knows his time is short, and he is trying to knock the believers off their foundation. And if you are a true believer, you will be in conflict in some form in your life. And if you're not, then I believe you're not doing something properly in your spiritual walk with the Lord.
Oh, yes, that is very true. But what I want to talk about, a conversation was started last Thursday when Doug was out, and the end of it was kind of left up in the air with Brother Jackson, saying what I said was not true. And then, Doug, this is nurse back time, because Joe did something he's never, ever done to another caller before. So find the nurse back and get ready, because he put me on hold in the middle of talking with Mr. Jackson, because I needed to say to him that there's certain things that he believes that are just not true.
And ma'am, I'm glad you called back. I do want to apologize. I did get an email about that, and I didn't remember cutting you off, but I do remember you had two questions, and I remember putting you on hold after the first question, and we came back to you for the second question, and you weren't there. But if I did cut you off, I apologize.
I got shuffled to the bottom of the queue. And what happened is you never put any other caller to a guest on hold before. You've never done that. We've been listening for 2.5 years or more, and you've never done that. It was just strange, and I thought it was just a nerf bat moment. But
I'll get the nerf bat.
Oh.
Just for you, ma'am, I'll get the nerf bat.
And again, I apologize.
Good. Thank you.
Okay,
now that that's over with, this is the point that I was going to make and that I didn't get a chance to make. Brother Jackson, he loves the Lord. He may be a nice brother and everything, but the doctrine he holds, that once saved, always saved doctrine, is not of God. I'm sorry, there's no scripture for it. You have to literally cherry-pick scriptures out of context to make it fit their doctrine, not reading what's before or after it. And he said that I was wrong. And what I wanted to tell him, the only unconditional thing Christ did was when he went to the cross. Everything after that is conditional upon one thing. You are to continue in the faith. It's not a thing of works, but you have to continue in the faith until the end. Whatever your end is, whether your end is the grave, whether your end is the rapture, whether your end is whatever, it doesn't. You have to continue. And he never said that. And the other issue I have is what he said. He said all we have to do is acknowledge our sins. Acknowledge our sins. Let me tell you, if you have two children, and they did the exact same thing wrong, and one says, yeah, Mom and Dad, I did it. I acknowledge I did it. And the other child says, Mom and Dad, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have done it. I knew better. I did it anyhow. By the grace of God, I'll never do it again. Which child repented?
Oh, it's obvious. Yeah, it's obvious. The one who apologized obviously repented. And, I agree with you. I've had conversations with Greg Jackson about this before. I don't believe in going and saying, well, okay, I give my life to Jesus, and then going out and becoming a Charles Manson kind of guy. That's a very extreme situation. I don't believe that person. But see, I believe his point of contention was, well, that person was never saved to begin with, or never converted, gave his life to Christ to begin with. That's kind of where I'm thinking that.
Like a predestination.
Okay, but that's the extreme. Those are diametric opposite things. He's saying you get saved in 1979, you repented, you asked the Lord to come into your heart, your life, and you started to walk. I'm saying you walked all the way. He's saying he's never had to repent for anything since 1979. And he never said, he said all you have to do is acknowledge your sin. He never said you have to repent of it and ask for forgiveness. Just take it for granted that you're forgiven because you acknowledged it. And that's basically what it boils down to. And there's no scripture to back that up. I love the brother. His book may be a good book for anybody who needs it. But let me tell you something. That doctrine of once saved, always saved is a heresy. And whenever somebody puts it across as truth, we have every right as being good Bereans and just good watchmen and watchwomen to call it out and say that is a lie. And I cannot say amen to a lie. I don't care from whose mouth it comes.
No, nor should you, nor should we. And, I know Greg Jackson very well. I did not hear the program. I still haven't gone back to listen to it. I did get your email. Yeah, I will. I will do that. But again, and I can't speak for Greg, but the way I see it playing out or his position is this, very simply. If you truly give your life over if you truly accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, you are not going, you will walk the walk, you will not, you'll backslide because we cannot stay out of sin, we're human. On the other hand, you will not, by default, your default setting will not be, how do I put it, I didn't want to go to the extreme. Go ahead.
What he's trying to say is once you're in the palm of God's hand, and I agree with this, no one can pluck you out. And that's 100%. But that doesn't mean you can't climb out. That doesn't mean you can't be enticed out. That doesn't mean you can't be tricked out. He's not taking you out, and he's not throwing you out. But you have a free will to do what you want. And that's where, with him saying, anybody who thinks he puts Jackson and people who hold to that doctrine put themselves above Paul. Paul said he has to keep unto himself daily that lest he who preach to others become a castaway. You understand?
Okay.
So that's what I was saying.
Well, okay, yeah. I think you've really clearly made your point, and we really appreciate it. The fact that Greg's not on with us at this point, we really can't. I really can't speak for him, and we really can't carry this further. I will,
in fact, talk to Langford. Ask Pastor Langford the next time you talk to him.
Oh no, Pastor Langford has said. He said, "Look, you can be blotted out of the book of life." There's a scripture for that. So Pastor Langford has said that. So yeah, absolutely, yes.
Oh, okay, all right. I just want to make sure I was not. He said I was wrong, and I'm not wrong, and I just had to get that straight. Okay. God bless you.
Very
guys.
well. God bless. Thanks so much for the call. And Joe, I wasn't there, so and I know that you explained to me that you put her on hold, and because it was a multiple question, but okay.
All right,
enough.
Let's go to area code 503. 503, you're up next. Thanks for holding. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. What's on your mind tonight?
Oh, thank you. God bless you and Doug, Joe, for the programs and everything. It's so important, and I'm telling you, Dave Hodges on the Common Sense Show has done extensive research on the Ebola virus.
He has, yeah.
He's got it posted 2 to 21 days. When he started posting this way back, I started buying the suits and everything.
I'm telling you, I talked to Dave off air, and yeah, it's he's very concerned, obviously, as am I, as we all are.
And there's a chemical out there, Virilex 2. Got it from MedVet. They sell it. It kills blood bacteria. You can spray it. It comes in concentrate. All those things. I bought those weeks ago when Dave was speaking of this.
Well, that's great, and I think we shouldn't panic, certainly, but we need to prepare, and I think now is the time, if you haven't done so already, is to prepare. So, very sage advice. Good. I'm glad you have taken steps to prepare yourself. Thank you for the recommendation for killing the bloodborne transmission.
Yes.
He's
got a lot of information on where this is going. I mean, it just goes to Steve Quayle, who wrote the book, told us it was coming, told us last night it was coming with Tim Alberino.
That's right. That's
right. I mean, they were spot on.
And you can go back to the September 25th episode with Dr. S. that Steve did, and the question I asked, which haunts me to this day, is what would what would be the worst case scenario? And the doctor replying, hearing that there's a case here in America, and here we are today.
They've posted it, several articles. The CDC owns the patent to the virus. Yeah. Several, actually. Yeah. Dave posted that. Dave said, get ready. I asked Dave via email this morning, what are the possibilities that our cats and dogs, pets, could be carriers?
Good question.
I've never thought of that.
Yeah. I mean, we saw the pictures of Sierra Leone. We saw those dogs licking up the blood in the streets. Now, they may not be a carrier of the virus, but they have it. They could have it on their fur. I don't know. He said he was going to look into it. I trust him. I mean, he's got a whole section there on Ebola. He said it was coming. He said prepare weeks ago. We did. And then you got to go to Paul McGuire. And he said we are told to occupy until Christ's return.
What a fantastic connecting of the dots from Dave Hodges, who I respect, and of course Paul McGuire. I'm really close with him and respect as well. Great call. God bless you, man. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you guys. Thank you for what you do.
Well, thanks for being out there and for occupying. That's what we need.
We're listening. We are. We're listening. I don't know where this waking up is coming from. I think a lot of us are awake.
Well, I think it's contagious. I think you're actually spreading that to others. So we really appreciate it.
All right, you guys. Thanks a lot. Love you, Joe.
Love you too. God bless you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. Up next, we have our intelligence insider, W. Welcome to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
Hey, haven't had a chance to speak with your audience for a while, or you guys. I've been in the thick of battle, so it's good to touch bases for a minute. Just one quick note, the gal that 2 calls back, two people come to mind. I believe it was Stalin. I can't remember if it was Stalin or Lenin. One of the two of them had actually gone to cemetery, whatever, and was practicing to be a priest, and then later went on to all of the mischief that we now know. And so you think of, how saved was that. But the other one that is in the news right now all the time and who's on the cover of Bazaar magazine, women's magazine, if you go to your local store, is Katy Perry. Here she grew up in a home with a pastor father and ministry, and she wanted to be a gospel singer. And so obviously had some kind of salvation experience, and yet now is very vocal about having become a, practicing, witchcraft, Luciferian. And so, you have to take into account that somebody can reject their salvation.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Absolutely. But how, W, how solid or how legitimate was their embracing of the acceptance of our Lord and Savior
let's
to
go
begin
back
with?
to let's go back to the devil himself. Wasn't he a member of heaven there before the throne of God, and all
That's
those
true.
that followed him, and yet they made a choice and were cast out of heaven because of that choice? You know, I understand what she's saying, and I think that while there may be some room for discussion, I think that you know, we have to be careful that you know, there are things that blaspheme. You know, isn't that what the devil himself did there? Yeah, something that could, you know, if we say if we reject the Holy Spirit, we don't even come to any kind of enlightenment without the presence of the Holy Spirit. If you reject him, how can we don't come to God. God calls us, brings us home. If we reject that, there's no room for the call to even be heard, you know, any awakening there. So I think there's, you know, room for, we need to be, you know, that's very sensitive ground, and I would be very hesitant to be too overly assertive, and it may be that Mr. Jackson was not completely understood somehow in there in what he said, but I didn't hear that particular show. I've been fairly busy. You know, when it comes to even being misled, even now I'm thinking of a meeting that I had some folks that flew out to meet with me, and I came out of my missile silo and popped the hatch open to see what was going on. Now I know that Ebola is out. I think I got to go back in there right away. But you know, I had some folks that flew out to meet with me here last week, and we had a very tense meeting. And these are not folks that most of your listeners would know, but very high ranking individuals in the military and intelligence community that were here on a business project that you're aware of that I have been involved in, and wanted to review some of the stuff that we had going. And what was remarkable in that meeting was the different levels of understanding, even amongst people that are very connected, have a history of being very connected politically and militarily, etc. And yet there was a very wide range of actual knowledge of where we're at, what our capabilities are, you know, within our military, what the real history is within our politics. And it was pretty surprising. The guys that actually had the real understanding, they were not so sure-footed in knowing exactly what's going to happen next and how things are going, because they understand there's more to this game going on. And the ones that were really almost, you know, kids in so many ways with real credentials were just cocksure positive exactly where we were at. Well, you know, we're in a very bizarre moment in our history. Not just as a nation, not just as Christians, but on the whole planet. Even the things that Stan talks about. There's so many things, so many variations and unknowns. We've learned so much wrong. Here Stan's talking about, well, you got to go back millions of years to understand Pangea and things like that. And he says, no, it's 4,800 years back. And 4,300 years back. And once you understand it in that light, changes the whole equation. And there's Eden right there. We've been taught with absolute assurity so many things that are absolutely assuredly wrong. And so we have to second guess so much of what we're told and is said and measure it against the Word of God and kind of reason through so many of these things and maybe not be quite so cocksure without some additional guidance, review, understanding, even if it's somebody that we really like or trust, we still do have to do our homework and second guess and measure it up and make sure that it matches the real truth, the real information, and that even good guys who are pretty smart haven't got some things wrong or misstated it, or that we've misunderstood what they stated and need to, listen again, rethink it again. Part of the reason that we're in the mess we're in as a country and as a people and as a church is because there hasn't been this critical examining and re-examining self-examination of what has been said by so many of the leaders that are in charge around us. And it's beautiful that we have listeners like your listener a couple calls back who are not being disruptive and not being adversarial for adversarial sake or something, but that are measuring and testing and verifying the information because they consider their life, their salvation, that important. And they're not just flitting through life and just accepting whatever's said. Oh, that's so wonderful. That's neat. That's how we have all these leaders that say all these things and, okay, well, that's the way it is. Well, it's not the way it is. There's a lot of stuff that we need to be second-guessing.
No, I love your statement that we've learned so much wrong. That's so true. And there are so many absolutes that are nothing close to absolute. And it seems like the younger a person is, and I remember, man, the old saying goes when you're, when you're 18, you realize how, or you think or something about when you're 18, your father is stupid, but when you're 40, you realize how smart or intelligent your father was, or whatever.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is, and I butchered that, but anyway, my intent is to say that, with age comes a certain degree of wisdom if you apply, or hopefully it does anyway. We have to second guess. We have to look at things and in different perspectives.
But even look at the show that you guys are doing, and these other shows, whether it be Hodges or any of the other ones, John B. Wells and Robin Falkov, some of these other hosts, who they come back with information, and now you have to take the things that you hear in the general media, the things you learned in school, the stuff that you hear over the coffee maker at work, and then you have to rethink it and remeasure it to make sure that what everybody knows is true is actually the facts and not just what we've all been kind of badgered into accepting as the obvious truth. We're being gamed right now by professionals who every aspect of what's coming out in the media. I was looking, and some of your listeners probably saw the stuff where they spent $100,000 on staging for President Obama's presentation down in Florida the other day when he talked about going after ISIL or ISIS.
I saw that.
You got it. Okay, well, but what's the deal? Because they have to make things present in such a way that you don't challenge it. It gets past your filter. So how things look affects how you accept or don't accept something. That staging is part of the mental manipulation. One of the things I mentioned to you earlier today, we were just talking about Katy Perry. Go look at that cover of Bazaar magazine this week, Bazzare or whatever it is. And on the cover, here's Katy Perry. She's beautiful. She's dressed beautifully. And in a very prominent way, she has her hand draped in front of her. And on her hand is a jewel-encrusted diving dove Now, in a lot of the churches that we attend around the country, we have doves that are part of the ornamentation in the church. And in a lot of the publication, there's the diving dove right on the ornamentation. What has been a theme all year long in media all across the world, printed and reprinted over and over again? In the Malaysian Airlines crashes, the disappearance and then the crash, the two planes. That trident image is also can be confused or seen as a diving dove. The flag there in Ukraine is a diving dove. There's this imagery of the trident. A lot of the passengers in the second plane crash there in Ukraine went to a school and they were showing in shirts that had this trident sign or diving dove sign. And so somebody's trying to send messages. You know, she could have worn, you know, a turtle, a toad, salamander. She could have worn, you know, just a beautiful octagonal ring or some different thing. That diving dove, jewel-encrusted ring has a message and a meaning. You know, I'd ask your listeners, is she communicating with others? Is it an insider message, an insider joke? Is it predictive programming? What's the message that a symbol like that is intended? And even the way that she's tilting her hand, I don't think it's innocent. I don't think she's doing it innocently. She's fully part of whatever message is trying to be conveyed there in a very subtle but prominent, flashy way. It's like Beyonce flashing the triangle, the all-seeing eye triangle at the end of her performance at the Super Bowl, this Illuminati symbol. You know, the people flagging the devil horns with their hands between each other. These messages, these insider messages, reaffirm, reconfirm, send messages to each other. We're in control. We have the ball. And they're power signals between each other. And they're messages to the rest of us, resist
their notifications.
Futile, you know. Their notifications. There you go.
Yeah. I mean, it's actually their fulfillment. Isn't there? I'll ask you this: isn't this their fulfillment of us, or them wanting us, or them telling us what they're going to do? Is that part of it?
Well, I think I would open it to your listeners, and obviously we're at the end of the show almost, and so I'd be interested in their feedback, even to you in emails or stuff on the blog talk. I have a particular belief what those symbols portend and how they view those, but I'd be interested in hearing what your listeners think about them and if they've thought about them, because so much of what's happening around us, we're so busy, we're so bogged down, we don't even have time to contemplate it, but they are subliminal messages and they are subliminal PowerPoints, almost an acupressure point into our psyche, into our society. And so what are they gaming us? What are they, it's like the prepare in the Super Bowl message that Nathan discusses and other things. So what is this diving dove thing? See, if it started the year with that diving dove imagery, but here we are at the tail end of the year and it's still prominent. It's still important. Why? Because that's an overriding theme of this entire year is the way that I personally see that. And so, what's that hidden message? And are we, as Christians, should we be paying closer attention to what these messages are, or are they irrelevant to us? We read in somebody else's mail, it doesn't matter to us, and we need to focus on our own things. Maybe we don't need to give them the power of our attention. Maybe your listeners would think that that's misdirected efforts on our part or a waste of our time. But I'm kind of a signals guy. I want to intercept the enemy's messages and understand what their next thing is afoot, to try and intercept it, to anticipate it, to throw the monkey wrench in it, if you will. And Allah, as has been done thus far with Syria. Now, we're right back here again. We're right back at Syria. We started right out, kept it from happening. For all the other places on the planet, as we discussed years ago now, Syria explodes. It doesn't implode. All of these other things happening other places are really leveraging off of and being played off of Syria. Even if you get to the dramas happening with China and Japan and other things, because even to the stuff going all the way to Australia, because it's about working us, like bending a piece of metal back and forth, back and forth. It's the hot and cold. Even with these subliminals with the hot and cold buckets and things like that, of ice water like that, we're being played mentally to break us. And this imagery is part of that game, to break us into submission, to accept their dominance, to become their mental slaves, to succumb, to accept the role of captives by these that would dominate us. And we have to occupy and resist in order to hold that ground. And even the Ebola stuff, all of these things, they're trying to break our will to stand and hold our ground, to give up.
Man, I'll tell you what, that's a fantastic assessment. W, we're at the end of the program. You closed us out, brother. Thank you so much. What a very informative call. And we're going to be talking about a lot of this tomorrow night. Hope you can join us tomorrow night. When we talk, or tune in tomorrow night when we're talking about a lot of this. Indeed, folks, you heard the call. What do you think about Katy Perry, about that particular picture, given her station in life and her? You mentioned something about her being part of the Obama inner circle, I guess.
Well, look at that concert she did there at the White House with the candles being lit in red, the chandeliers being lit in red. We know there's hidden messages that aren't that hidden. They're right in our face.
Right.
And I'd be curious if there's other things that I've missed. What are these other hidden messages that are being put in front of us? Besides that, I just point that one out. Or is there a symphony of them that are coordinated, that fit together? Not just that they're hidden messages, but is there a theme here that we should be paying attention to right now?
Brother, that closes us out. Thank you so much, my friend. God bless.
All right.
Folks, that'll do it for tonight. Until tomorrow. And tomorrow's going to be a great show. Make sure you tune in. God bless. Good night.